Welcome to Single Reads with Dr. Lori. Today we're going to put the clarinet together properly. Usually, before I put the clarinet together myself, I usually take the reed and I put the reed in my mouth. The reed has to be wet in order to work, in order to get the sound. The clarinet has to be able to vibrate, so it has to be wet. So for today, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to put the clarinet together, and then I will show you the reed and how you put the reed on the mouthpiece. So we'll start with the clarinet itself. There are 5 parts to the clarinet. Okay, first part we have is called the bell. Okay, this is my bell. And my bell is going to go onto the lower joint, which is the larger of the 2 joints. On the lower joint, you see you have one end that has cork and another end that doesn't have cork on it. It's completely open. There's going to be another instrument part that goes into that one. Okay, so since it has a cork, okay, we want to use something called Cork Grease. This is the kind of Cork Grease I like to use. It's in a nice tube, and many companies make them. This one is made by Ligature. And I put that around, and you want to make sure, especially if you have a new clarinet and it's got a very stiff cork on it or very new cork, you want to make sure that you do that really good for several days until it's easy to put the clarinet together. If you crank too hard on a clarinet, you could damage your keys, and we don't want to do that. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the bell to the lower joint. All right, so as you can see on this one, there's a back side here that has a lot of wood, and then there's a side over here that has a lot of keys. Now I want to make sure that I hold it in a way where I'm not going to damage the keys. So I'm going to put the cup of my hand, I'm going to cup my hand around this part here, and then just put my fingers very firmly as such. So I'm holding onto it very firmly with my left hand, and it's not moving around, and I'm not putting my hand up here because I don't want to crush those parts of the keys. Okay. All right, so then I'm going to take my bell, and I'm going to very gently just twist and push that on. And it goes on really easily because my corks are nice and greased up, and that makes it very easy to put together. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put together the upper joint to the lower joint. All right, now on the upper joint, okay, we want to do the same thing where we want to make sure we hold it in a place where we're not going to damage our keys. But there is one little thing about the clarinet in the upper joint. We have this little thing called a bridge key, okay? And the bridge key goes over on the lower joint a section, as you can see how that is on that one. So what we want to do is we want to take our upper joint, and we want to put our fingers over the rings on the upper joint and hold those down, and that raises up that joint. So we can very carefully then slide that into place and then line it back up. And it's a really easy way to do that if you make sure that you put your hand on here so it opens it up, and then you can slide that back on. You have to be really super careful about that, because if you get that messed up, first of all, the clarinet's not going to coordinate, it's not going to play right together, and you could also damage this right here. Okay, so you have to be careful with that. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the barrel. Now we have greased both of these ends here, so we have another cork right here. So now the barrel is what goes on next. Okay, so I'm going to hold my clarinet right here. I'm going to put the bell on my knee, and I'm going to hold it up in this area where there aren't any keys again. And I'm going to take the barrel, and I'm going to just gently put that on there. Just gently push and twist, and it should go on very easily for you. Okay, all right, the last thing is going to be the mouthpiece. Now you can see that the mouthpiece also has cork on it. So we would want to make sure that we grease this as well. Okay, go all the way around with that. And then we hold it again up here in this area. We're going to set it into the smaller end of the barrel and then just gently push. Now what we want to do is we want to line the back side of the mouthpiece, this flat side right here. Here's where the open part where the reed's going to go, right on this side here. And we want to line this part up here with this key here. Okay, this is called our register key. All right, so what you can do is you can just hold it, you can just kind of look down. I used to take my finger and I run it up the register key and make sure that I'm lining up the flat side, open side of my mouthpiece to that, and then you've got that in the right place. Okay, now, next thing we're going to talk about making sure that we put on the reed correctly. Now that we have the mouthpiece on, we're going to put the ligature on. So you want to turn your mouthpiece over so you can see where the flat side is. It's flat on one side and it's open. That's where you're going to be putting the reed. So first we have to put on the ligature. Okay, the ligature is the thing that holds the reed onto the mouthpiece. Notice that there are screws on the right side. When we put the reed on, we put the flat side of the reed to the flat side of the mouthpiece. We line up the reed with the top of the mouthpiece, just so about a hair of black is showing across the top. And we want to try really hard not to touch the reed too much if we can. Definitely don't want to touch the tip. And then when we get it in place, we want to screw those right side screws on. Now notice how you have to have it below the line where the unshaven part starts, and you want to make sure it's below the part of the front of the mouthpiece so that you're not up on where it starts to curve. Now, there are two different kinds of ligatures. The first one was called a regular. This one is called an inverted ligature, where we have the screws on the top side. Okay. Now, one way you can always remember that where a ligature is going to be placed is because it's going to always have the screws on the right side. Always going to have the screws on the right side. And so if it be on the top or if it be on the bottom, that's how you can tell. Another way you can tell is that the top of the ligature is slightly smaller than the bottom. The bottom is a little bit larger. So when you put the bottom on, the larger part on first, it's going to fit the mouthpiece better. Okay, so just again, it's really important to make sure that you put on your ligature properly. Okay, make sure that you don't unscrew the screws the entire way. Make sure you put it on the larger part first, then the smaller part is on the top part, and then you just tighten those screws enough so that when you move the ligature around just a little bit, or if you have to take off your mouthpiece, it's not going to come off the mouthpiece. The reed's not going to fall off when you do that. Okay, so you have to just be really careful when you do that. All right. Again, if you see some people have screws on the top, that doesn't mean that you have to switch yours around if you have a regular. They are made two different ways and they're both good. The one I play on just happens to be one that is an inverted ligature. Okay, so the screws are going to be on the top of the mouthpiece on the right side, and the regular kind is on the bottom side. So again, don't try to turn your ligature around because you think somebody else, is right and you're wrong. Ligatures come two different ways. Okay. All right. So that is basically how you put the clarinet together. Okay. It's really very easy. The main thing you want to remember is just try not to crush the keys. Try to hold the clarinet in areas where there are not as many keys. Okay. Be careful of that bridge key. Make sure that when you put that on, you're going to hold this part up so you can very carefully screw that on. And then the reed, make sure you're very careful with your reed when you put the reed on, because this is the part that's going to vibrate when you blow into it, and it's going to make the sound. If you don't have the reed, you're not going to get any sound. Okay, so hopefully you're not going to have any issues putting that together. Good luck, and I will see you the next time.